The most ruthless truth of the entertainment industry does not lie in the dark, but happens right under the brightest stage lights. The audience is applauding a masterpiece, unaware that the female lead is being harassed right in front of their eyes, unable to fight back, unable to cry for help, because the perpetrator is an untouchable moral monument. In this video, let's expose the manipulation trap of the mentor, the cruel complicity of the collective, and the hypocritical veil of the elite. Dustin Hoffman in 1985 was not viewed as a Hollywood bad boy. He did not have a reputation for causing trouble on set. He built a massive empire playing the relatable, awkward, deeply ethical American man. This public image is crucial to understanding how the abuse was hidden for so long. When a public figure spends decades projecting decency and vulnerability on a movie screen, the public assumes that decency is real. This PR image acts as a bulletproof vest. If a controversy ever arises, the public instinct is to defend the good guy actor and attack the accuser. Hoffman walked into the Death of a Salesman production wearing this exact armor. He was a two-time Academy Award winner. He was the main attraction, the primary box office draw, and the undeniable boss of the entire production. He held absolute leverage over everyone in the building. Kathryn Rossetter was positioned on the opposite end of that power structure. She was a young, unknown actress, landing a role in a high-profile Broadway play opposite Hoffman was the peak of her early career. We need to look directly at the economic and professional reality of a theater rookie. Unknown actors live audition to audition. They need the stage credits. They need the paycheck to pay their rent. When a young actor secures a role in a major production, the unspoken rule is simple. You do not rock the boat. You keep your head down, you hit your marks, and you please the star. Furthermore, Kathryn viewed Hoffman as her ultimate industry idol. She trusted his acting methods. This power gap was not just professional, it was a severe psychological imbalance. He held the power to fire her and blacklist her with one single phone call to the producers. This is where the psychological manipulation begins. Predators in the workplace rarely start with physical harassment on day one. They start by building a foundation of trust. Hoffman initiated a textbook grooming technique, the mentorship trap. He did not act like an arrogant, untouchable star toward Kathryn. Instead, he played the role of a dedicated, attentive teacher. He pulled her aside from the rest of the cast. He gave her private acting lessons, spending hours outside the regular rehearsal schedule, dissecting scripts and teaching her advanced Broadway techniques. He made her feel like she had a hidden potential that only he was smart enough to recognize. Grooming requires isolation. By giving her private lessons, Hoffman separated Kathryn from her peers. He made her feel special, chosen, and elevated above the rest of the supporting cast. He then escalated this tactic outside the walls of the theater. Hoffman brought Kathryn into his private social circle. He introduced her to prominent directors, wealthy producers, and the Broadway elite, to the rest of the cast, and to Kathryn herself. This behavior looked like incredible professional generosity. It looked like a veteran actor paying it forward, but it was a calculated investment. Hoffman was manufacturing a massive psychological debt. When a megastar hands an unknown actor direct industry access, the rookie internalizes a crushing sense of gratitude. She owes him her current job, her new industry connections, and her future career prospects. Financial debts are paid with money. Psychological debts demand silent compliance. The American dream narrative in entertainment dictates that actors must struggle for years to get one lucky break. Hoffman handed Kathryn that lucky break, but he attached a heavy, invisible string to it. Every time she stepped onto the stage, she felt a heavy reminder that she owed her success to him. This debt creates a terrifying dynamic. The mentor holds the ledger. When he eventually crosses a physical line, the victim feels she lacks the moral authority to stop him. You do not slap the hand of the man who just fed you. You do not report the man who just introduced you to your future agent. You swallow your discomfort. You force a smile. You prioritize his ego over your own safety because the debt demands repayment. Hoffman built a fortress of professional trust around her, blinding her to the approaching danger. He dismantled her natural defense mechanisms before any physical boundary was ever crossed. The Hollywood and Broadway systems enforce this compliance. The industry conditions young actors to endure extreme discomfort for the sake of the art and the star's ego. The star is the center of the production. Everyone else is a replaceable asset. Hoffman knew this system inside and out. He knew his status as an Oscar winner provided him with total immunity on that set. He weaponized Kathryn's own ambition against her. He gave her the career breakthrough she desperately wanted, knowing it would paralyze her ability to speak out against him. When the inappropriate behavior eventually started, Kathryn's defense mechanisms were already gone. When a hand rested too low during a scene, or a boundary was crossed during a rehearsal, her brain rejected the red flags. This is severe cognitive dissonance. It is a basic survival mechanism. Admitting that her idol, her mentor, and her career savior was actually a predator was too devastating to process. Acknowledging the abuse meant risking her job, losing her industry connections, and confronting the most powerful man in the room. Her brain chose to protect the career opportunity by denying the threat. Instead of reporting the behavior, she rationalized it. She told herself he was just an eccentric physical artist. She convinced herself that touching was part of his intense method acting process. She assumed he was just joking around, attempting to build character chemistry for the play. She thought, he spends hours helping me. He introduced me to the elite. He cannot have bad intentions. This internal rationalization is the reaction the predator relies upon. He depends on the victim to gaslight herself. He sets up the chessboard so that the victim excuses the abuse because the alternative is career suicide. Hoffman did not just use his power to grope a young actress. He used his power to groom her, to indebt her, and to force her to participate in her own silence. The trap was set, the debt was firmly established, and her compliance was secured before the physical harassment even reached its peak. He hid his abuse behind the mask of a dedicated mentor, turning the rehearsal room into a psychological trap that she could not escape without destroying her own life. With the psychological debt firmly established during rehearsals, the trap was fully primed. But the most horrifying aspect of this scandal is not where the manipulation began. It is where the actual violence was executed. Society operates under a collective assumption that predatory behavior requires secrecy. We are conditioned to believe that monsters hide their actions, cornering their victims in dark alleys, locked hotel rooms, or secluded casting couches. Dustin Hoffman shattered that comforting myth. He did not isolate Kathryn Rossetter in an empty hallway. He orchestrated his abuse in the most public, brightly illuminated space imaginable. He assaulted her directly under the intense stage lights of a prestigious New York theater, right in front of a live audience. We need to step inside the Broadhurst Theater in the mid-1980s to grasp the terrifying mechanics of this situation. Death of a Salesman is not a lighthearted comedy. It is a heavy, emotionally draining American tragedy. When the curtain rises, the audience enters a state of deep emotional investment. They sit in the dark, eyes fixed on the stage, watching Hoffman deliver what critics called a master class in acting. The irony is suffocating. The people in the front rows were weeping, deeply moved by a fictional story about family struggles and moral decay. They were paying premium ticket prices to witness the illusion of human suffering. Meanwhile, less than 20 feet away from their seats, a very real, unscripted human tragedy was playing out right before their eyes, and they saw nothing. Hoffman utilized his decades of stage experience to turn the performance space into a hunting ground. A seasoned theater actor understands sight lines better than anyone. They know what the audience can see from the orchestra seats and what is hidden from the balcony. Hoffman used his own body as a physical shield. During intimate scenes where their characters interacted closely, he would position his back to the crowd. He used his legendary stage presence to draw the audience's focus toward his face and his dialogue under the cover of his own shadow, shielded by the carefully designed stage blocking. His hands went to work. He routinely slipped his hand under Kathryn's costume. He groped her thighs. He repeatedly made aggressive attempts to reach her genitals. This was not a fleeting brush of a hand or an accidental backstage collision. This was deliberate, sustained physical violation, happening while both actors were actively delivering lines of dialogue to a packed house. You have to analyze the immense, twisted confidence required to pull this off. He was acting in one of the most demanding roles in the history of American theater, memorizing pages of complex dialogue, hitting precise emotional cues, and simultaneously orchestrating a sexual assault without missing a single beat of his performance. This brings us to the most insidious weapon in his arsenal. Hoffman did not just use his physical positioning to trap her. He weaponized the theater's audio equipment. Broadway actors wear microphones, or they perform oversensitive floor mics designed to pick up a whisper and project it to the back of a massive auditorium. This technology acts as a massive magnifying glass for sound. Hoffman knew this better than anyone. He understood that the live microphone was the ultimate gag. Put yourself in Kathryn's shoes for a fraction of a second. You are standing on a Broadway stage. A famous man has his hand up your skirt. Your natural human instinct is to gasp, to shove him away, to yell for him to stop. But if you make a sudden noise, the microphone catches it. The sound amplifies through the massive speakers. The audience jolts out of the story. The scene halts. The illusion breaks. Hoffman banked on her professionalism to enforce her own silence. He knew she possessed too much respect for the craft, nay, and too much fear of the industry to sabotage the scene. He effectively held her hostage using the live audio feed. He forced her to choose, in a split second, between protecting her bodily autonomy and protecting the million-dollar production. She chose the production. She swallowed her panic. She forced her voice to remain steady. She delivered her lines while enduring an active assault, locking her trauma behind the mask of her character. She became a prisoner of the spotlight. We must examine the toxic industry culture that made her choice inevitable. The American entertainment machine operates on one brutal, unforgiving commandment: the show must go on. This phrase is often romanticized as a testament to artistic dedication. Actors are praised for performing with broken bones or high fevers, but in reality, it is a ruthless corporate mandate. A Broadway play is a massive financial investment. Stopping a show costs money. It angers the producers. It alienates the audience. It invites vicious reviews from the theater critics sitting in the aisle seats. The system conditions young actors to believe that stopping a performance is the ultimate professional sin. If Kathryn broke character to slap Hoffman's hand away, the industry would not have halted the production to investigate her well-being. The theater management would have viewed her as a hysterical, disruptive liability. The press would have destroyed her reputation before the morning papers were printed. She would carry the blame for ruining a cultural milestone. Hoffman understood this power dynamic perfectly. He did not need to threaten her with words. The systemic pressure of the Broadway machine did all the threatening for him. The culture of the theater demanded her silence, and he exploited that demand to the fullest extent. There is a dark psychological theory regarding why a predator with limitless access to private spaces chooses to offend in public. Why take the risk on stage? Many experts and industry insiders speculate that the presence of the audience was not a deterrent for Hoffman. It was the entire point. It provided an intoxicating thrill. For a man who already conquered Hollywood, who already possessed millions of dollars and universal acclaim, standard power loses its edge. He needed a stronger dose. Groping a vulnerable co-star in front of 1,000 oblivious people delivers the ultimate adrenaline rush of supremacy. It is a God complex manifested into physical action. Every time he successfully assaulted her, and the audience applauded, he received confirmation that he was untouchable. The audience's ignorance fueled his arrogance. He proved to himself that he could violate a woman in plain sight, and the world would still give him a standing ovation. The true horror of this situation lies in its relentless repetition. A movie set allows for multiple takes, but eventually the scene wraps and the actors move on. Broadway is a different beast entirely. A successful stage play relies on a grueling, repetitive schedule. They performed 6 to 8 shows every single week. Tuesday night, Wednesday matinee, Wednesday night, Thursday evening, Friday evening, a double header on Saturday, a Sunday matinee. This frequency transforms the abuse from an isolated incident into a scheduled cycle of torture. Kathryn did not just endure a surprise attack. She woke up every single morning knowing what time she was going to be assaulted. Imagine the psychological toll of that reality. The dread begins building the moment you open your eyes. It intensifies during the afternoon commute to the theater. It suffocates you as you sit in the dressing room, applying your stage makeup, listening to the stage manager call the half-hour warning over the intercom. You walk toward the wings knowing the monster is waiting for you under the lights. You cannot call in sick. You cannot hide. You have to willingly walk onto the stage and present yourself to your abuser because your contract demands it. Her workplace became an assembly line of humiliation. We also have to question the environment surrounding the stage itself. The stage is not an isolated island. It is bordered by the wings. Dozens of people exist in the dark periphery of a Broadway performance. Stage managers grip their clipboards. Prop masters organize tables. Fellow actors wait for their cues. The crew members operating a production of this size possess sharp eyes. They notice when a prop is moved an inch out of place. They notice when an actor skips half a line of dialogue. It is highly improbable that an entire crew stood in the wings for months and never noticed the lead actor repeatedly breaking his physical blocking to grope his young co-star. The rumors and whispers of the theater world suggest that people saw. They knew the physical boundaries were being crossed, but the unwritten rules of the hierarchy enforced a strict code of silence. A stagehand does not confront Dustin Hoffman. A supporting actor does not jeopardize their own paycheck to intervene. The bystander effect paralyzes the crew. They convince themselves it is just part of the creative process, or they decide it is simply above their pay grade to care. This collective blindness isolates the victim even further. Kathryn was surrounded by dozens of working professionals, standing just feet away in the dark, yet she was abandoned. When the final curtain dropped each night, the audience rose to their feet. They cheered for the brilliance of the acting. They celebrated the raw emotion of the story. They threw roses at the feet of an American icon. And Kathryn Rossetter had to stand right next to him, holding his hand during the final bow, pasting a grateful smile on her face, while her internal reality was collapsing. The stage lights faded. The crowd went home feeling culturally enriched, and the cycle reset itself, waiting to crush her all over again the very next evening. The nightmare didn't stop when the curtain fell. The violation Kathryn Rossetter endured under the stage lights was devastating. But the abuse she suffered behind the scenes exposes a much darker reality about the American theater system. We have to follow the actors backstage into the supposedly safe zones of the dressing rooms and rehearsal spaces. The events that occurred away from the paying audience prove that Hoffman's actions were not impulsive mistakes made in the heat of a performance. They were calculated acts of domination designed to humiliate a subordinate and entertain an audience of his peers. Consider the layout of a theatrical backstage area. It is a tight, chaotic labyrinth of costume racks, prop tables, and narrow hallways. It is an environment where personal space ceases to exist. Hoffman utilized this architecture to escalate his control. The most aggressive documented incident did not happen in secret. It happened as a public spectacle. Let us break down the skirt incident. This event is vital because it reveals the systemic complicity of the production crew. According to Rosetter's detailed accounts, Hoffman gathered the technical crew, the lighting technicians, the sound engineers, the stagehands. These were men who controlled the physical mechanics of the theater. He told them to gather around because he had a surprise for them. He positioned Kathryn in the center of this male gaze. Without any warning, he grabbed the hem of her slip and violently pulled it up over her head. He exposed her body to the entire crew. This was not a prank. A prank involves mutual amusement. This was a public degradation ritual. It was a demonstration of absolute power. Hoffman used her body as a prop to assert dominance over the working-class crew members. He forced them into the role of spectators. We must analyze the reaction of the crew. They did not intervene. They did not yell at the star to stop. They laughed. They participated in the humiliation. This reaction stems from the toxic frat boy culture that dominated the American entertainment industry in the 1980s. The set was a boys' club, and Hoffman was the undisputed king. The crew members relied on his approval for their paychecks and future employment. Laughing at his jokes, no matter how cruel, was a survival mechanism. It was the currency used to buy favor with the star. The system demanded that they prioritize the ego of the leading man over the dignity of the supporting actress. By pulling that slip over her head, Hoffman did not just violate Kathryn. He recruited the technical crew as accomplices. He proved that he could commit a physical assault in broad daylight, and the industry would protect him with its silence. The abuse extended beyond public spectacles. Hoffman sought out private moments to reinforce his control. He cornered Kathryn in the narrow hallways outside the dressing rooms. He would press his body against hers, trapping her against the wall. He demanded physical affection. He demanded massages. On one terrifying occasion, he summoned her to his private dressing room. The power dynamic in a star's dressing room is absolute. It is his sanctuary. Once inside, he grabbed her hand and forcefully placed it on his genitals. We need to unpack the psychology of that specific act. It is not about sexual gratification. It is a test of obedience. He forced her to cross a profound physical and moral boundary to prove his dominance. He forced her to become an active participant in her own violation. The psychological damage inflicted by that act is immeasurable. It shatters the victim's sense of self-worth and implants a deep, paralyzing shame. She walked out of that dressing room carrying a secret that tied her to her abuser. Hoffman also manipulated the official documentation of the production to erase his crimes. We have to examine his interaction with the camera. In the era before smartphones, the cast photo was a sacred tradition. It was a physical record of the production, a souvenir of a shared artistic endeavor. Hoffman weaponized this tradition. Whenever the cast gathered for promotional photos or backstage snapshots, he positioned himself next to Kathryn. He would place his arm around her, projecting the image of the nurturing mentor. However, his hands told a different story. As the photographer prepared to take the shot, Hoffman would slide his hand onto her breast or grope her inner thigh. He perfected a chilling technique. He possessed a supernatural awareness of the camera's shutter. He knew the exact millisecond the flash would fire. He would grope her, wait for the photographer to count down, and then whip his hand away a fraction of a second before the lens captured the image. This required intense concentration and practice. It proves premeditation. He wanted the thrill of violating her in front of the lens, but he possessed the cunning to ensure the physical evidence never materialized. He left her standing there, flushed, violated, and unable to explain her distress. If she complained about the photo shoot, the developed film would contradict her story. The photographs would show a smiling cast and a benevolent mentor. He manipulated the physical record to gaslight his victim and protect his legacy. But a predator cannot control every variable. The machine is not flawless. Out of the dozens of photographs taken during that production, one image slipped past his defenses. One photograph survived to corroborate Kathryn's nightmare. In this image, Hoffman did not pull his hand away fast enough. The camera caught the reality of their dynamic. The photograph does not show a mentor and a student. It shows an aggressor and a target. Let us analyze this image like a crime scene investigator. In the photograph, Kathryn's arm is raised. Her hand is a blur of motion caught in the act of physically pushing Hoffman away from her body. Her facial expression is not a staged theatrical smile. It is a mask of genuine tension and discomfort. The image captures a desperate, uncoordinated attempt to defend her physical boundaries. However, a casual observer glancing at the photo might misinterpret the visual data. The blurred motion, the forced proximity, the established narrative of their mentor-student relationship, it all creates a confusing picture. A studio executive or a fan might look at that image and see two actors playfully roughhousing. Hoffman relied on that ambiguity. He knew that the culture was conditioned to give the famous man the benefit of the doubt. The photograph is a physical manifestation of her entrapment. She is fighting back, but the system interprets her struggle as a joke. The image proves that the abuse happened, but it also highlights the terrifying reality that the evidence was not enough to save her. We cannot view Kathryn Rosetter's experience in a vacuum. To understand the depth of this problem, we must examine Hoffman's behavior across his entire career. This was not a localized incident contained within the Broadhurst Theater. It was a systemic pattern of behavior. We have to look at the testimony of other women who shared the screen with him. Consider Meryl Streep. In 1979, years before the death of a Salesman production, Streep starred opposite Hoffman in the film Kramer vs. Kramer. This film won 5 Academy Awards and solidified both of their careers. But the working conditions were toxic. Streep, who was already a respected actress but not yet an untouchable icon, described her very first encounter with Hoffman. They met to discuss the project. Hoffman walked into the room, introduced himself, and immediately grabbed her breast. He established his dominance before the cameras even rolled. During the filming process, his behavior escalated. In a crucial, emotional scene, the script required an intense argument between their characters. Without any prior discussion, without the director's approval, Hoffman hauled back and slapped Streep across the face. The slap was real. It left a physical mark. He also weaponized her personal grief. He knew Streep was mourning the recent death of her partner, the actor John Cazale, before a scene where she needed to cry. Hoffman whispered Cazale's name in her ear, using her real-life trauma to force a reaction for the camera. When questioned about these incidents, the industry reflexively deployed the method acting defense. Directors and producers brushed off the assault and the emotional manipulation as the eccentricities of a dedicated artist. They argued that the slap added gritty realism to the scene. They claimed the groping was an aggressive attempt to break the ice and build character tension. The system prioritized the final product over the safety of the performer. The connection between Streep's experience and Rossetter's nightmare is undeniable. It proves that Hoffman did not suddenly develop predatory habits in 1985. He operated with impunity for decades. He tested the boundaries with a rising star like Streep, and when the industry rewarded him with an Oscar instead of a reprimand, he learned that he was untouchable. He carried that arrogance to the Broadway stage, escalating his behavior against a younger, less powerful target. The abuse was not a byproduct of his acting method. His acting method was a carefully constructed shield for his abuse. The physical acts of abuse were horrific, but Dustin Hoffman did not act alone. He was the primary aggressor, but he required an ecosystem to sustain his behavior. When we analyze the timeline of this production, a chilling question emerges. How does a man grope a woman on stage every night, pull her skirt over her head in front of the crew, and repeatedly corner her in the dressing room without a single person intervening? The answer lies in the concept of institutional gaslighting. The trauma inflicted on Kathryn Rossetter was magnified 100-fold by the deafening silence of the people standing right next to her. The monster inflicts the initial wound, but the complicity of the crowd ensures that the wound never heals. To understand the culture of the death of a Salesman set, we must introduce a sociological concept known as the missing stair. Imagine living in a house with a broken staircase. Instead of fixing the dangerous step, every person living in the house simply learns to jump over it. They adapt to the danger rather than eliminate it. When a guest comes over and trips on the missing stair, the residents blame the guest for not knowing the route. Hoffman was the missing stair in that theater. Everyone in the building, the producers, the director, the stage managers, the technical crew, knew he was a hazard. They knew his behavior crossed the line. But instead of confronting the multi-million-dollar asset, the entire institution chose to tiptoe around him. They expected the young, replaceable actress to simply absorb the impact. Let us examine the active complicity of the crew. When Hoffman gathered the technicians to watch him pull Kathryn slip over her head, they did not walk away. They laughed. They participated in the degradation, but the complicity went deeper than passive observation. According to reports, members of the wardrobe department, the people tasked with ensuring an actor feels safe and comfortable in their costumes, often stood guard outside Hoffman's dressing room door while he engaged in inappropriate behavior inside. They acted as lookouts. They transformed from theater professionals into enablers. They chose the security of their weekly union paycheck over the basic human dignity of their colleague. This is the rot at the center of the American entertainment machine. The hierarchy demands total loyalty to the star, even when that loyalty requires participating in the abuse of a subordinate. But the most damning defense of Hoffman did not come from the working-class crew members. It came from the men in charge. When the allegations broke years later, the men who ran that production rushed to the microphones to protect the legend. We need to dissect their statements because they expose the twisted logic used to shield predators. Listen to the words of Tom Kelly, the production stage manager. The stage manager is essentially the captain of the ship. Their entire job description centers on maintaining a safe, organized, and professional working environment. When confronted with Rosetter's detailed accounts of sustained sexual harassment, Kelly did not offer an apology. He did not claim ignorance. He went on the offensive. He publicly called her allegations an insult to the production. He stated that her story didn't ring true. Consider the arrogance required to issue that statement. The man whose primary responsibility was to monitor the backstage environment actively called the victim a liar to protect the star. He weaponized his title to discredit her memory. This is textbook institutional gaslighting. He told the public, and he told Kathryn, that her lived reality was false. By calling the accusation an insult, he shifted the narrative. He made Hoffman the victim of a smear campaign, and he painted Rossetter as a vindictive liar trying to tear down a masterpiece. Now, let us examine the defense offered by the director, Volker Schlendorf. The director sets the tone for the entire production. Schlendorf brushed off the allegations of physical harassment with a casual, devastating label. He called Hoffman a kidder. He categorized the groping, the humiliation, and the manipulation as mere practical jokes. He argued that Hoffman's behavior, including slapping a female assistant on the rear end, was just his unique way of creating atmosphere on the set. This argument is the ultimate weapon of auteur apologism. It rebrands sexual assault as a quirky leadership style. Schlendorf told the world that the atmosphere required to produce a brilliant play justified the psychological destruction of the women working on it. He viewed Kathryn Rossetter not as an artist, but as acceptable collateral damage in the pursuit of high art. When the director, the highest creative authority in the room, officially sanctions the abuse by calling it a joke, the victim loses her final avenue of escape. Who can she report the star to when the boss is the one laughing the loudest? The industry also deployed the shield of method acting. They argued that a genius actor must blur the lines between reality and fiction. They claimed the unwanted touches and unscripted aggression were simply the actor staying in character. This provided a convenient intellectual justification for ignoring the screams of the victim, allowing studio executives to count box office receipts without feeling a shred of moral guilt. The contrast in memories between the powerful men and the vulnerable women exposes the true nature of privilege. To the director and the stage manager, The 1985 production of Death of a Salesman was a triumph. It was a glorious chapter in their careers, filled with awards, critical praise, and fond memories of a playful, brilliant star. To Kathryn Rossetter, it was a prison sentence. The powerful men remember the jokes because they were not the punchline. They recall a fun atmosphere because their bodies were not the ones being violated to create it. This systemic denial forces the victim to carry a double burden. Kathryn did not just have to process the trauma of the physical assault. She had to process the trauma of being universally disbelieved. She had to watch the men who enabled her abuser accept prestigious awards. She had to watch the media celebrate the man who destroyed her confidence. The silence of the crew, the gaslighting of the stage manager, and the dismissive excuses of the director formed a united front against her. They built a wall of deniability around Hoffman, ensuring his legacy remained spotless while hers was quietly erased. The monster may have initiated the attack, but the institution held her down. People always ask the obvious question, why did she not report him? Why did a talented actress endure months of groping and humiliation without walking into an office and filing a formal complaint? To answer that, we must dissect the brutal reality of freelance labor in the American theater system. We have to look at the power dynamics that govern unions and the terrifying concept of industry blacklisting. Broadway actors pay dues to a union called Actors' Equity. The organization exists on paper to protect workers from unsafe environments and abusive behavior. Kathryn Rossetter considered utilizing this protection. She sought counsel from seasoned theater professionals, asking for guidance on how to stop Hoffman's advances. Their response was a chilling reflection of the Hollywood hierarchy. They warned her. They told her that if she filed a grievance against Dustin Hoffman, she would lose her job. But the warning carried a much heavier consequence. They told her she would likely never work in the theater industry again. Examine the mechanics of a whisper network. The entertainment industry operates on reputation and relationships. Directors talk. Producers share information at exclusive dinners. Casting agents trade gossip. If an unknown freelance actress files a harassment claim against a box office giant, the studio executives do not view the famous man as the liability. They view the complaining actress as the risk. She receives the label of difficult. She becomes categorized as a troublemaker who disrupts multi-million-dollar productions. The system protects the asset that generates ticket sales. Kathryn faced a devastating ultimatum. She could report the abuse, stand up for her physical boundaries, and commit instant career suicide. Or she could endure the daily humiliation, smile for the cameras, and secure her paycheck. She chose survival. The Broadway machine weaponized her poverty and her ambition against her. They cornered her into silence. The union provided a false sense of security, functioning as a shield for the elite rather than a sword for the vulnerable. The intimidation extended far beyond unwritten industry rules. Hoffman and his inner circle utilized aggressive legal bullying to ensure her permanent silence. Trauma requires an outlet. Kathryn tried to process her nightmare through her art. She channeled her pain into a play, drafting a script based on her experiences working on Death of a Salesman. She wrote down the memories to reclaim some fragment of her own narrative. Word of this personal script reached Hoffman's management camp. The response was immediate, swift, and ruthless. His representatives contacted her. They demanded she hand over her personal writing. They threatened her with massive, crushing lawsuits if she ever attempted to publish, perform, or distribute the material. Analyze the sheer power imbalance of this threat. A wealthy movie star utilizes high-powered corporate attorneys to silence a freelance actress trying to heal her own mind. They did not just want to stop the production of the play, they wanted to send a definitive message. They demonstrated that they monitored her actions. They proved they possessed the financial muscle to bankrupt her in court. They showed her that she owned nothing, not even her own memories of the abuse. This constitutes legal violence. The studio machine isolates the victim, buries her under the threat of insurmountable legal fees, and forces her to surrender the only weapon she has left, her voice. She handed over the script. The threat of total financial ruin enforced her silence. Hoffman engineered another method of control, one that relied on intense psychological blackmail. We must examine the dark archives he reportedly curated backstage. Various industry accounts and rumors point to a practice where Hoffman pressured young, vulnerable actresses into taking sensitive Polaroid photographs with him. He framed these requests as innocent cast souvenirs, a fun backstage tradition to remember the production. Place this behavior within the context of a man who routinely groped his co-stars during live performances. When a predator holds a compromising photograph of a victim, he holds ultimate leverage. He creates a secret archive of vulnerability. For a young actress trying to build a serious, respected career, the existence of those photos acts as a constant looming threat hanging over her head. If she decides to speak out, the photos might leak to the tabloid press. Her reputation would shatter. This tactic is a form of image possession. He captured their vulnerability on film and used it as an insurance policy against exposure. The victim lives every day with the anxiety of knowing her abuser holds the trigger to her public destruction. It forces the victim to become an active participant in hiding the crime. If any defenders try to argue that Kathryn Rossetter misinterpreted his actions, or that the environment was just an eccentric artistic experiment, we must introduce the timeline of Anna Graham Hunter. Her story shatters the defense of isolated incidents and proves a systemic pattern of predation. During the filming of the Death of a Salesman television movie adaptation, Anna worked as a production assistant. She was a very young intern. She was barely starting her career. Her job involved fetching coffee, organizing scripts, and running basic errands for the cast. She possessed zero authority and zero influence. Hoffman targeted the young assistant. According to her detailed journal entries written during that time frame, he groped her backside 4 separate times. On her very first day on set, he demanded she give him a foot massage. He subjected her to relentless, graphic sexual conversations. Anna detailed hiding in the set bathrooms, crying from the sheer humiliation and confusion. She did what society tells young women to do. She reported the behavior to a production supervisor. The supervisor's response exposes the moral rot of the entire film crew. They told her she needed to sacrifice her values for the sake of the production. The veteran crew told a vulnerable young rookie to absorb the physical abuse of a middle-aged man because the shooting schedule dictated it. The pattern is undeniable. He sought out the youngest, most vulnerable targets in the room, the individuals with the least amount of capital to fight back. He tested the boundaries with the young assistant, and the crew gave him a free pass. The true cruelty of this scandal materializes when you track the diverging paths of the abuser and the victim in the years that followed. You must look at the split screen of their lives to understand the crushing weight of Hollywood capitalism. In 1988, just a few years after he terrorized Kathryn Rossetter and Anna Graham Hunter, Dustin Hoffman starred in the film Rain Man. He won his second Academy Award for Best Actor. He stood on a brightly lit stage in front of millions of television viewers, clutching a golden statue. He received a standing ovation from his wealthy peers. He grew richer. His legacy solidified into concrete. He became a respected elder statesman of American cinema, praised for his sensitivity and his profound dedication to the craft of acting. Now, look at Kathryn Rossetter. Her promising career momentum died. She carried the heavy trauma of that Broadway production into every subsequent audition. The psychological damage eroded her confidence. The industry labeled her as damaged goods. The high-profile roles vanished from her desk. She faded away from the spotlight. To pay her rent and survive in the city, she transitioned into teaching acting. The woman who survived the psychological torture of a predatory mentor had to become a mentor herself just to stay afloat. She spent her days teaching young actors the techniques of the stage, knowing firsthand the monsters that hide in the wings. She lived with the invisible scars for decades. She carried the secret while she watched her abuser accept Lifetime Achievement Awards on television. When she finally found the courage to publish her story in the wake of the modern social justice movements, she summarized her pain using a haunting phrase. She wrote that Hoffman left dirty fingerprints on her soul. This is the ultimate cost of the Hollywood machine. The system protects the financial asset. It polishes his awards. It hides his crimes. And it sweeps the broken bodies of his victims under the red carpet. The industry demands silence to maintain the illusion of the magic. Dustin Hoffman used his power to steal Kathryn's dignity, her career, and her peace of mind. And the American theater establishment handed him a trophy for his performance. For decades, the silence mandated by the Hollywood studio system seemed impenetrable. Men like Dustin Hoffman operated with a chilling sense of invincibility, assuming the culture of complicity would protect them forever. But cultural shifts do not occur overnight. They build like pressure in a fault line. The tears Kathryn Rossetter cried on that Broadway stage, and the tears Anna Graham Hunter shed in that production bathroom in 1985 were not erased by time. They accumulated. They merged with the silent suffering of thousands of other women across the American entertainment industry. And when that pressure finally broke, it rewrote the rules of engagement for an entire industry. We must examine the explosion of the hashtag #MeToo movement because it fundamentally altered the structural reality of Hollywood. This was not merely a social media trend. It was a rapid, brutal dismantling of institutional gaslighting. The movement provided a platform for victims who had been blacklisted, silenced by non-disclosure agreements, and dismissed by powerful unions. When Kathryn Rossetter and Anna Graham Hunter finally stepped forward to name Dustin Hoffman, they were no longer isolated targets facing down a billionaire. They were part of a massive, undeniable chorus of truth. Their testimony shattered the auteur apologism defense. The public stopped viewing Hoffman as a quirky, dedicated genius and started viewing him as a man who abused his power. But the true victory of this cultural reckoning extends beyond public shaming. A viral hashtag can ruin a reputation, but it takes structural reform to protect the next generation. The most significant, tangible outcome of this scandal and the broader movement is the mandated restructuring of the Hollywood set. The industry was forced to confront the fact that relying on the moral compass of a powerful leading man is a catastrophic failure in risk management. This realization birthed a new vital role on American film sets and Broadway stages, the intimacy coordinator. To understand the profound impact of this position, you have to look at the power dynamic it dismantled. Before 2018, choreographing a romantic or sexual scene was often left to the director and the actors, a process ripe for exploitation. A powerful male star could easily cross physical boundaries under the guise of improvisation or method acting, just as Hoffman did. The young actress had no advocate in the room. The intimacy coordinator serves as that advocate. They act as a specialized choreographer and a strict boundary enforcer. Their presence on a set fundamentally changes the math for a predator. Let us break down their specific protocols. Before a camera rolls, the intimacy coordinator conducts private check-ins with each actor. They establish explicit, uncrossable physical boundaries. They define where hands can and cannot go. This process eliminates the toxic excuse of spontaneous character interaction. If an actor crosses an established boundary during a take, it is no longer an artistic choice. It is a documented violation of workplace safety. Furthermore, intimacy coordinators introduce the use of safe words into the production environment. If an actor feels uncomfortable, overwhelmed, or senses a boundary violation, they can halt the production instantly without the fear of being labeled difficult. The coordinator empowers the vulnerable performer to override the director and the star. Crucially, these professionals are trained to recognize the psychological signs of trauma. They watch the actors closely during takes, looking for signs of dissociation, the freeze response Kathryn Rossetter experienced on the Broadway stage. When an actor checks out mentally, the coordinator intervenes, pausing the scene to ensure the performer's psychological safety. They normalize continuous consent. Consent is no longer a blanket agreement, signed in a contract on day one. It is an ongoing negotiation verified before every single take. The introduction of the intimacy coordinator effectively neutralizes the missing stare phenomenon. The crew no longer has to pretend the danger does not exist. The danger is identified, managed, and regulated by a trained professional. This structural change strips away the privilege of the untouchable elite. It forces men like Dustin Hoffman to adhere to the same professional standards as any other employee in a corporate workplace. The push for accountability also forced the major labor unions to evolve. Organizations like Actors Equity and the Screen Actors Guild, which historically turned a blind eye to the abuses of their most famous members, faced intense pressure to revise their mandates. The era of protecting the box office draw at the expense of the working class actor ended. The unions implemented strict dignity in the workplace guidelines. These codes of conduct explicitly define harassment, establish confidential reporting mechanisms, and mandate anti-harassment training for every production. They closed the loopholes that allowed predators to hide behind the vague shield of artistic freedom. The American entertainment industry is built on the myth of the struggling artist paying their dues. For decades, that myth included enduring physical and psychological abuse from men who held the keys to the kingdom. The courage of Kathryn Rossetter, Anna Graham Hunter, and countless others exposed that myth as a toxic lie. They endured the isolation, the blacklisting, and the stolen careers so that the next generation of actors could step onto a stage without fear. The legacy of the 1985 production of Death of a Salesman is not a celebrated performance by an American icon. Its true legacy is the agonizing cost of silence. But from that darkness emerged a necessary revolution. The stage lights are brighter now. The shadows where predators used to hide have been illuminated by strict protocols and dedicated advocates. The industry was forced to realize that true artistic brilliance does not require the destruction of a human soul. The tears shed in the wings finally forced the Hollywood machine to prioritize the safety of the artist over the ego of the legend. The core sickness of this scandal lives in the text of the play itself. Arthur Miller wrote Death of a Salesman to hold a harsh mirror up to the corrupt soul of American capitalism. It is a story built on the agonizing pursuit of decency, family values, and the moral collapse of a man desperate for success every night. Dustin Hoffman stood on the Broadhurst stage and preached those ethical lessons to a weeping audience. He delivered powerful monologues dissecting human dignity. Then, the moment he stepped out of the spotlight, he discarded that morality. The hypocrisy is staggering. The men running this production built a shrine to a fictional tragedy while turning a blind eye to the real one unfolding in their own dressing rooms. The masterpiece functioned as a velvet curtain for a predator. We must forever kill the excuse of method acting. The entertainment industry spent decades defending Hoffman's actions as the eccentric process of a tortured genius. Let us define what acting requires. Acting is the disciplined art of illusion. A master stage magician makes the crowd believe a woman is sawed in half, but no blood spills on the floor. A master actor uses physical technique, vocal control, and emotional memory to trick the audience into feeling genuine danger. If a performer needs to strike a co-star to portray aggression or grope a young woman to demonstrate dominance, they are not acting. They are committing an assault. Using real violence to force a genuine reaction is not artistic brilliance. It is profound technical laziness. It is a massive failure of the craft. When directors brush this behavior off as a quirky way to build character chemistry, they degrade the entire profession. A stage is supposed to be a safe laboratory for dangerous ideas. Hoffman turned that safe laboratory into a trap. This dark chapter stands as a permanent indictment of the American theater establishment. The industry prioritized ticket sales over basic human safety. They allowed an icon to treat a young woman's body as a disposable prop. But history is rewriting the narrative. The standing ovations have faded. The glowing reviews belong in dusty archives. What remains is the undeniable truth of the collateral damage. No Broadway crown, no prestigious award, and no box office record justifies the destruction of a human being. The art must never cost more than the artist. When the final curtain falls or the cameras stop rolling, the trauma for these actresses does not. What we have just seen is proof of a toxic power dynamic, where art becomes a shield for abuse, and silence is bought with fame. It is time for the truth to be heard. What are your thoughts on this dark reality? Leave a comment below. Don't forget to subscribe to Actor Secrets as we continue to expose the dark side of Hollywood. Thanks for watching.